Hello, and welcome to Metro Nashville Public Schools High Impact Tutoring. This is Module 2, Middle School Literacy, for tutors who will be working with students in 6th through 8th grade reading. Here's an overview of the tutor training modules. You've already completed Module 1, Getting Started. Today I will guide you through Module 2, Middle School Literacy. This module is specifically designed for tutors who will be working with 6th through 8th grade literacy. You'll finish up with modules on accelerating scholars technology and childhood protection in FERPA. Please take a moment to read through the objectives of this module. In this session, we will learn more about Metro Nashville's tutoring pilot and how it connects with building a strong foundation of literacy skills. We'll learn about the curated texts for middle school literacy tutoring and their connection to students' core literacy instruction. We'll identify where to access the daily pacing guides and how to best plan for a successful tutoring session. First, let's take a look at how MNPS strives to build a strong foundation for reading through literacy tutoring. Please follow along on your screen as I read this quote out loud. We need to give more students the right opportunities because the stakes are high. Research shows that children who don't learn to read by the end of 3rd grade are likely to remain poor readers for the rest of their lives, and they're likely to fall behind in other academic areas too. People who struggle with reading are more likely to drop out of high school, to end up in the criminal justice system, and to live in poverty. But as a nation, we've come to accept a high percentage of kids not reading well. More than 60% of American 4th graders are not proficient readers, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And it's been that way since testing began in the 1990s. Emily Hanford, Hard Words. These disparities all too often affect marginalized students the most. If you are a student of color, an English language learner, or a student with learning and thinking differences, you are less likely to get the right opportunities in literacy instruction. This can cause obstacles in literacy development, which has negative effects on all other areas of academic development as well. The COVID-19 pandemic and associated school closures have caused even greater disparities in student performance. A September 1, 2022 report on the current National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, performance highlights the dramatic effect of the pandemic on student learning. 2 decades of growth for American students in reading and math were wiped away by just 2 years of pandemic-disrupted learning, according to national test scores. The need for effective, high-impact tutoring to support early literacy growth is clear. This training module will focus on the curriculum resources and strategies that you can use to best support the students you're working with. Here's an overview of our middle school literacy curriculum selections. 6th through 8th grade students use a core English language arts curriculum called myPerspectives. Students in 6th through 8th grade literacy tutoring will use high-quality instructional materials that were specifically created to align to the core instruction students are already receiving in class. Before we dig into the reading curriculum materials, let's pause to take a look at the progression of reading skills that will ensure our middle schoolers become strong, fluent readers who are reading to learn rather than learning to read. The image you see on the screen is Scarborough's reading rope. In 2001, Dr. Hollis Scarborough created the reading rope using pipe cleaners to convey how the different strands of reading are all interconnected, yet independent of one another. For many students, learning to read is a challenge. Scarborough's rope captures the complexity of learning to read. Scarborough's reading rope is made up of lower and upper strands. When all of these component parts intertwine, it results in skilled and accurate, fluent reading with strong comprehension. The lower strands include phonological awareness, decoding, the alphabetic principle, letter-sound correspondences, and sight recognition. The upper strands include background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. In the earlier grades, we focus on decoding and phonemic awareness skills that come together to build increasingly automatic word recognition for early readers. While many of our students may need continued support with decoding and word recognition, we really want to ensure that we're focusing on language comprehension by building background knowledge and vocabulary. Your tutoring sessions in middle school literacy will focus on reading fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. These areas will ensure that our students become increasingly skilled readers, fluent in word recognition and text comprehension. Now let's take a closer look at the myPerspectives curriculum and how it impacts our tutoring materials. myPerspectives is a powerful English language arts curriculum for grades 6 through 12 that values the perspective of the learner, collectively and individually, and provides next-gen learning experiences that promote higher achievement and develop the competencies needed for college and career readiness. Interactive learning blends print and technology in a student-centered, teacher-inspired classroom. This dynamic SAVAS program creates an interactive, engaging, and relevant learning environment through readings, meaningful activities, and purposeful performance tasks. myPerspectives encourages social collaboration as well as student ownership of learning through goal setting, choice, and reflection. Each unit in myPerspectives is organized around an essential question. Essential questions are important questions that recur throughout all our lives. They are broad in scope and timeless by nature. Students will read selections that illustrate the key ideas related to the essential question for the unit. Students also build academic vocabulary, study elements of different genres of writing, and complete writing assignments focused on a specific genre each unit. Accelerating Scholars tutoring sessions will supplement the core instruction from students' English language arts classes through reading and writing assignments using a curated set of texts that align to the theme of the current myPerspectives unit. As you can see on the screen, our 6th graders start with Unit 1, Childhood. The essential question is, what are some of the challenges and triumphs of growing up? The myPerspectives unit is built around the anchor text, Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. And your tutoring sessions will also include articles and other readings related to this theme and essential question. Each tutoring session has common session components. You'll have a session opening, which is also a time for continued relationship building. You'll have a connection to previous learning, an introduction of today's objective. You'll have mini lesson routines focused on fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. You'll have checks for understanding. And finally, there's always a session closing, a time to reflect with your student on what went well and what could be better for next time. Let's take a look at each of those components more in depth. The session opening and time for continued relationship building. Take this time to briefly converse with students, building the tutor-student relationship. Students are more engaged in the work, and tutors can spend less time addressing behavior issues during sessions when the tutor-student relationship is strong. Connection to previous learning. This is the time to shift the conversation smoothly to a follow-up from the previous session. This is particularly important if the tutoring sessions build on one another. If necessary, you can use this time to remediate any unfinished learning that the students will need today. Introduction to today's objective. Introduce today's learning objective. Activate relevant prior knowledge with leading questions that guide students to make connections to today's topic. Give students an overview of the work they will do today. The mini lesson routines, focused on fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary, make up the largest portion of your tutoring session. This section will align with students' grade level instruction. Using the same style and level of texts or passages being used in core instruction, you as the tutor will implement one or more of the following lesson routines: fluency, comprehension, or vocabulary. Depending on the length of the lesson routines, each tutoring session will only incorporate one or two of these lesson routines, as opposed to all three. Checks for understanding. These should be short and should ask students to do only what was modeled and practiced within the session. Many times the checks for understanding will involve comprehension questions related to the reading that you've completed that day. And finally, the session closing, a time to reflect. At the end of your tutoring session, check in with your students to determine how they felt about the task of the day and what you might improve for the next session. End the session with positive reflections for your students. You've just heard about the mini lessons focused on fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. We also want to note that writing is a critical part of literacy instruction for our middle school students. Throughout the teacher guide, you will notice opportunities to have students respond to what they've read in writing. Please note that 7th and 8th grade students have writing prompts embedded in most of their tutoring sessions. They'll also have space to complete these writings in their student workbook, as pictured below. Now that we've learned about the essential components and building a strong foundation for literacy, let's dig deeper into the materials that you'll use during your time with students. First, you'll need to know. It's important to know which grade level that you've been assigned to tutor. Reading tutors use a pacing guide within the teacher guide. That guide provides a day-by-day lesson plan with materials needed for each session. So that tutors remain on pace, it's important to identify the tutoring day you will begin. Most people will begin on week 1, day 1. Tutors can access all curriculum materials directly in Go School Box by clicking on the Resources tab of your top menu bar. You will then select View More for the resource you want to access, and you'll be able to open and download the resource. Curriculum resources and these training modules are available through both Go School Box and the Tutor Resources page of the MNPS website. Let's review the major components that tutors will need when conducting their tutoring sessions. In the next slide, we'll explore what these resources look like and detail how you can use them in your literacy tutoring sessions. Your main resources are the teacher guide and student workbook. You'll utilize the teacher guide to plan for sessions and the student workbook to refer to students' texts and activity pages. Please note that students will have access to a printed student workbook for their own tutoring sessions. The image below shows an example of the teacher guide. The first page contains an overview of the specific units that students are working on in their English Language Arts classes and what you'll be using as the basis for your tutoring sessions. In the example below, you'll note that 7th grade is focused on Unit 1, Generations, at which students are studying in class through October, and then Unit 3, Turning Points. The tutoring units reinforce the literacy skills and knowledge that students are already building in their classrooms. The next portion of the teacher guide is the literacy tutoring session outline. This portion contains a table showing the session components and the explanations that you just learned in this training. It's always there in your teacher guide in case you need to refer back to the session components or review what should be included in each component. Next, you have a session calendar. You can use this portion of your teacher guide to jump to a specific day. Hopefully this saves you time and energy not having to scroll through all of your prior lessons. Finally, you'll have access to the actual session plans. You have a session plan created for each day of tutoring. The session plans all include the same core components that we've already reviewed, starting with the session opening, the connection to previous learning, the introduction to today's objective, the mini lesson routines, checks for understanding, and a reminder to close out and reflect with your student before the end of the session. Please note that the text that you will read each day with your student is available in the student workbook and also hyperlinked in your teacher guide. The hyperlink in the teacher guide includes the answer key for comprehension questions. The student workbook will be used to provide activities for students to reinforce the major concepts of the tutoring sessions. You can see here an example of the 7th grade literacy student workbook and what the text would look like for students. In addition to the printed text, the student workbooks will also include the comprehension questions and additional writing pages for other activities, such as the Write Your Own Definitions activity shown below. Take some time to pause and reflect. You can stop the video if you need to. What aha moments or surprises did you experience as a result of this module? What questions do you still have about reading tutoring or the 6th through 8th grade curriculum materials? Here are some quick notes for successful planning for tutors of accelerating scholars. Note that tutors should set aside at least 15 minutes to plan for a successful session execution prior to the start of each tutoring session. Also, tutors should log in at least 3 to 5 minutes before each session to be sure that they're on time when the student arrives to the session. Here are some essential things to keep in mind when wrapping up your tutoring sessions. Finish the activity of the day, or if you run out of time, at least make sure you're at a good stopping place. Be sure to give your student positive feedback about his or her effort or any specific praise from the day. And if time allows, you can preview the pacing guide for what you'll be working on in the next tutoring session. Now that we've gone over how to access and use the materials to plan a successful tutoring session, let's review a few simple practices to keep in mind when working with your literacy students. Here are a few final reminders before your first tutoring session. Remember that students should do most of the talking or reading. Read the entire section of the teacher guide before conducting your tutoring session. And finally, encourage students to cite evidence in the text as they answer questions or write their responses. We'd love to hear from you. What questions do you still have about the curriculum materials for 6th through 8th grade literacy? Please share any questions with us by emailing tutoring@mnps.org so that we can ensure you have all the support you need to be a successful tutor from day one. As you've learned, each school has a tutor lead who's designated to assist tutors and students with making sure the program runs smoothly. The tutor lead should be your first line of contact in the event of an emergency or if you have a school-specific question. If you have questions about policy, tutoring practices, or anything that goes beyond the school level, including questions about the Go Schoolbox platform, you can submit those to tutoring@mnps.org. Thank you again for serving as an Accelerating Scholars tutor. Your contribution to student learning is invaluable. And thank you for taking time to complete this module. You may now move on to Module 3.